All right, let's talk about the Home Rule movement. It was this short-lived but totally explosive movement that swept through India between 1916 and 1918. And even though it didn't last long, it fundamentally changed the political landscape. It really set the stage for the final massive push for independence by creating this incredible national awakening.
And really, the whole story of this movement boils down to this one central question. What happens when a massive empire tries to crush a movement and only ends up making it way, way stronger? We're going to see how the British attempt to stamp out this little fire for self-government actually created an inferno they just could not control. It's such a fascinating case of political blowback.
So, our story really kicks off in December 1916. We're at the annual session of the Indian National Congress, this time in Lucknow. And I want you to just picture the scene. A special train, which everyone was calling the Home Rule Special, rolls into the station. It is just packed with delegates, all ready to flood this session. The energy must have been absolutely electric because this was not just another meeting, this was a reunion.
And this quote from the Congress president at the time, Ambika Charan Mazumdar, just captures the mood perfectly. You see, for almost 10 years, the nationalist movement had been completely split. You had the moderates on one side and the extremists on the other. This Lucknow session, this was their historic reconciliation. It was this huge moment of unity after a whole decade of really painful division.
And this newfound unity? Well, it produced something pretty remarkable, the Lucknow Pact. Basically, this was an agreement between the Congress and the Muslim League to present a totally united front to the British. They were together demanding a huge step towards self-government. It was an absolute landmark achievement, a really bold political strategy. But, this unity came with a big compromise. A key part of the pact was that the Congress agreed to the principle of separate electorates for Muslims. And this was a hugely controversial decision. But the leaders at the time, they saw it as a necessary price for a higher goal, to calm minority fears and forge what they hoped would be an unbreakable alliance against the British.
And this quote from Lokmanya Tilak, one of the main leaders of the movement, shows you exactly how they managed to get this deal across the line. He gives this incredibly powerful speech, and he basically argues that unity is everything. His words just silence the opposition, because he framed this compromise not as some kind of weakness, but as an absolutely necessary step toward their shared national goal.
So at this very same session, Tilak proposes another pretty radical idea. He says, hey, let's create a small, permanent working committee to manage Congress's affairs all year round. He wanted to turn it from this, annual debating club into a real machine for sustained political action. But the idea was rejected. Now, I want you to remember this point. Just file it away in the back of your mind, because it's going to become incredibly important later on in our story.
Okay, so with this newfound unity, the movement just starts to build momentum. The Home Rule Leagues are gaining incredible popularity, and of course, the British government starts to get really nervous. So what do? They decide to crack down. They start by banning students from going to political meetings, but believe me, this was only the beginning of a strategy that was about to backfire spectacularly. And wow, just look at how quickly things blew up in 1917. So in June, the government arrests one of the movement's biggest leaders, Annie Besant. Now, instead of calming things down, this just lit a match to a powder keg. Protests erupt all across the country. Major leaders who had kind of been on the sidelines, people like M.A. Jinnah, they jump in and join the leagues and protest. Tilak even threatens passive resistance, a kind of mass civil disobedience. Suddenly, the pressure was just immense.
And get this, even the British Secretary of State for India, a guy named Edwin Montague, could see the writing on the wall. He wrote this incredible line in his private diary. He totally got it. He understood that by arresting this one leader, the government had basically created thousands of new activists. They didn't cut off the head of the movement, they multiplied it. It was a huge miscalculation. And all that pressure? It absolutely worked. In August 1917, Montague announces this historic shift in British policy. And to see just how radical this was, look at this comparison. Just 8 years earlier, Lord Morley had flat out said that reforms would never lead to self-government. But now, the official policy was the gradual development of self-governing institutions. In an instant, the demand for home rule went from being an act of sedition to being the stated goal of the British government itself. It's wild. And of course, Annie Besant was released a month later. So you would think this was the movement's greatest victory, right? And in a lot of ways it was. But here's the paradox. This is also the moment where the movement starts to lose its steam. By 1918, that incredible white-hot energy that had defined the Home Rule agitation, it just starts to fizzle out. So, what happened? Well, it was really a perfect storm of a few different things. For one, the promise of reforms was enough to satisfy a lot of the moderates. Then, when the actual details of the reforms came out, it split the nationalists right down the middle. Some wanted to accept them, others wanted to reject them entirely. Annie Besant herself was kind of wishy-washy and couldn't seem to take a firm stand. And then, to top it all off, Tilak had to go to England for a long time. So at the most critical moment possible, the movement was basically left without a leader.
But listen, to just see the end of the movement as a failure is to miss the point entirely. Its true legacy wasn't about winning self-rule right then and there. No, it was about preparing the ground, setting the stage for the person who would lead the final chapter of the struggle, Mahatma Gandhi.
So here's the real victory, the real takeaway. First, the movement created this whole new generation of passionate nationalists who were primed and ready for action. Second, it built organizational links that connected the big cities with the small towns and villages, really for the first time on this kind of scale. And maybe most important of all, it took the idea of self-government, which used to be a pretty elite academic concept, and made it a common, popular demand in households all across the country.
Okay, and now for the big payoff. Remember way back at the beginning, I told you to file away Tilak's rejected idea for a permanent Congress working committee? The idea that would turn Congress into a year-round machine for struggle? Well, fast forward to 1920. And who do you think picks up that exact idea and makes it a cornerstone of his new reformed Congress? Yep, Mahatma Gandhi. He's the one who finally implemented Tilak's vision.
So when you look at it that way, the Home Rule movement absolutely succeeded in its most important task. It awakened a nation. It created a whole generation of politically aware Indians who were really impatient for change. The problem was, its leaders, for all their amazing achievements, couldn't quite show them the next step forward. The stage was perfectly set for a new kind of leader with a totally new method of struggle.
And that really leaves us with this one final powerful thought. The Home Rule leaders had done the incredible work of bringing an entire nation to its feet. But now that it was standing, the question on everyone's mind was, who would lead it next?